Joining us now is Representative Rob Sampson. He's the head of the Conservative Caucus in Hartford. So I'd love to have him on because he speaks with great clarity on issues of left and right. How are you, Rob? Wait a sec. It's my job to put you on the air, which I always forget to do. So there you go. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Enjoying the show. I've been listening all afternoon.
Wow. So you're a shut-in today, I take it.
Yeah, we got the day off, and thankfully the state of Connecticut legislature cannot do damage today since they were not in the session.
Well, there can be a lot of planning, though.
Sadly, yes.
So I didn't clear this with you. We were just talking about the death penalty. I wonder if you might weigh in with the sort of a standard constitutional conservative look at the death penalty, particularly in light of the last caller. I think Jenny was her name, and she said that that we know now that through science that men don't have a mature brain until they're 25, and that part of the brain that doesn't develop is the one that is a behavior filter that hinders the spontaneous, stupid behavior. And I don't even know if spontaneous is correct, but it provides the ability to make rational decisions and to be reserved in terms of physical violence. I wonder how you respond to that. Does that change your view on death penalty at all, or make you concerned about it?
It's certainly a complicated question, but to me, the first place I would go is the rule of law. And in this country, at least for the majority of things, and as your first caller on the question of the death penalty stated, service in the military being a key measure of when someone is an adult. I believe if we have decided as a nation that 18 is the age that we consider to people to be adults, that should be the date that they are adults in every arena, whether it be the purchase of adult beverages, whether it be serving in the military, and whether or not you would be tried as an adult. Now, changing that date could certainly be up for debate, but as it is, that's the rule of law, and I believe that gentleman forgive me, I should not have called him a gentleman. He's an animal and not a gentleman, and I believe he needs to be held account for his actions as an adult.
Good. All right. I just wanted to get you on the record for that. And there's a bunch of other stuff going on, of course. You've been involved. There was a vote yesterday, of course, on the justice of the state Supreme Court, the Chief Justice. And
a related topic, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Death penalty is one of the key ingredients in that discussion.
Because he's viewed as, we had Senator Fasano on earlier, I guess you heard, and he was talking about his concern over Justice McDonald with regard to the death penalty vote, and he felt it was an activist vote. What's your assessment?
Yes. Oh, that's absolutely true. There's no question in my mind. Andrew McDonald served as a state senator, I think from 2003 until 2009. He served as the Senate chairman of the Judiciary Committee as a Democrat, and as a very partisan and very progressive Democrat, trying to move a lot of very left-wing issues, including the repeal of the death penalty, which he actively engaged in and supported and proposed on his own behalf when he was a state senator. He then became an attorney for the then sitting governor, Dan Malloy, and he served as chief legal counsel for the governor for a number of years, including the time when Governor Malloy was first elected and stated that he would absolutely do his best to repeal the death penalty during his term in office. And they proposed legislation, and that came to the legislature and was voted on. There had always been an attempt year after year to repeal the death penalty, and it never got much traction because of various issues. And at that time, the main
Excuse me, Rob, I'm sorry. This is a great story. I want to hear it in full, but we've got to get a traffic update. Representative Rob Sampson is with us from Wolcott. And you were laying out a really compelling chain of events with regard to Justice McDonald, who is a candidate to be Chief Justice. And you're describing what sounds like, if you were suspicious and conspiracy-oriented, a Malloy-McDonald plot to undo the death penalty in Connecticut.
Yeah, I honestly believe that, but you do not have to believe that to understand that Justice McDonald had a responsibility, whether or not he was an integral part of creating that deception. He was directly related to discussions on the death penalty as a sitting legislator, an active proponent of repealing the death penalty for many, many years. And when that issue came before him, the assessment of the elimination of the death penalty as a result of appeals coming forth, because the repeal was attempted to be done only prospectively, which was the game that they played. And when that came before him, he was absolutely required under the rules and under any measure of common sense to step back and recuse himself. But instead, he chose to be the deciding vote, the 4-3 vote to repeal the death penalty in its entirety in the state, which is something else that didn't have to happen. They could have easily said that we're striking this law as unconstitutional and maintaining the existing death penalty and sending it back to the legislature to draft something different. But they did not.
So this would be the most blatant example of judicial activism that you could imagine.
Yes.
That sounds. I've never heard the story told in that way. Leave it to you, Rob Sampson. That's very vivid.
There's much more to it, Todd. It would take us your entire show to get through the whole thing. But trust me when I tell you, there is a series of events that is undeniable. There are people who served in the legislature with me when that vote took place who said on the floor that there was no way this would stand a judicial review, but they were assured by the governor's office that it would hold up, so they're going to vote for it. And I don't know where that information would have come from other than from then chief counsel to the governor.
Wow. All right, so that's pretty powerful stuff. What else can we get into tolls a little bit?
Oh, I'm happy to talk about anything. I heard you earlier asking about what's happening in the next election and whether or not there is going to be a blue wave.
Oh, yes.
I'm here to tell you that's not going to happen. And I think the Democrats are on the run. They know that they are in danger. In Connecticut, for certain, Republicans are going to take over both chambers. We may get the governor's office. You can tell. They are in full wedge issue mode. The attack on Republican legislators for voting against the elevation of Justice McDonald, claiming that anyone who votes against him is doing it purely because he's gay, is the most ridiculous and absurd claim. They think this is a wedge issue that they're going to use to try and paint Republicans as anti-gay.
Yeah, but it's so lame, Rob. I mean, it's so without foundation and without credibility that it would seem to me the only thing they could hope is to use it to gin up a little excitement inside of certain constituencies in their base.
Yeah, I heard someone say just recently that they just throw the biggest bomb that they can find.
Yeah, I thought
that was a brilliant quote, actually.
I think that was me, and I think it is absolutely true. I mean, I don't think it's that brilliant. That's what they do. What is more?
A few things you said. Imaginary contempt. That's another aspect of that.
What is that?
Imaginary contempt is another thing that you mentioned, and that's exactly what it is. They are trying to gin up a division in our country, and that is the worst thing about the political dialogue that is going on now, and it's all coming from the left.
It is.
I am more than happy to have any type of reasonable debate on any subject with anyone because I respect individual freedom and liberty, and I understand that that's the basis for what makes America great. But I am constantly shouted down and told that I hate this group or that group because I will not comply, and that's just baloney. The only thing I comply with is my respect for the Constitution and individual liberty. And let me take a second just to thank your guest that you had earlier, Ashley Dummett, for doing such a great job of defending not only her own freedoms, but also everyone's constitutional rights. And she's
Wasn't
a brave girl.
She spectacular? 16 years old? Can you believe her? It's just stunning to me that some people can be so clear-headed and at such an early age. My wife said to me, stop saying she's so good for a 16-year-old. She's so good for somebody of any age.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned her because she had popped into my mind with what you were saying, and I was going to mention her. She did do a great job, and she was very – this idea of – and I forget if you would have heard me say this, but I've been talking recently about social media and how it used to be like on Twitter I could have conversations with people, I could get people engaged in a debate, or I could ask people questions about what their beliefs were and have them explain where they got a certain belief, like, okay, here are the statistics that drove me to this conclusion or what have you. I try to get people involved who are on the other side so I can learn. And they won't even respond now. It's a total echo chamber. There is no interest in having a conversation. I don't know what the point is if you're not mixing it up in debate and friendly debate and learning as you go.
I couldn't agree more, Todd. I try and engage in dialogue with people on my social media when I can. It's a difficult thing to do. I got a lot of other things on my plate. But I learn a great deal from the perspectives other than my own that I see and read. And sometimes I actually do change my mind when I am faced with information that I did not hear or see before. But so many people, and particularly on the left, will just close their eyes and their ears and not want to listen to anything. The constant onslaught of misinformation on gun control, if nothing else. I mean, talking about how guns spray bullets and, it's a military rifle. These things are not true. And anyone who takes the tiniest amount of effort to actually investigate what our laws are and anything about the function of firearms will learn that.
And by the way, the arguments that are most often repeated, that are central to the quote-unquote argument, are the ones that are the most off base in terms of the facts. It's an amazing thing. Rob, I feel like we're just getting warmed up. Do you have time to stay longer?
I would love to.
Okay. Rob Sampson is here. He's a state rep from Wolcott. Because he is the head of the conservative caucus in Hartford, we're talking with Rob Sampson, state representative. We're talking about everything we can think of. Thank you for doing this, Rob. It's fun.
It's my pleasure.
All right, let's get into guns. What irks you the most in the gun debate?
I guess it's the misinformation that is being put out by the advocates for gun control and the willingness of the majority of the news media to repeat their claims without ever checking the facts.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're failing to check or if the media is in some other mode where they're just so zealous in their desire to support Democrats and in particular in the gun issue, they're just so zealous in their anti-gun feelings that they don't bother doing any investigating.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that it's also that they are reacting to the fevered pitch of those voices on the left who want it so bad based on their emotional response. Same thing happened in Connecticut after Sandy Hook, and we passed this sweeping gun control legislation, which in my mind has not made us one iota safer, even though there were things that could have been done at that time and should have been done, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, what were the missed opportunities?
Well, I'll tell you one thing I just noticed today. One good tiny thing that happened in that entire sweeping gun control bill was money set aside for the statewide firearms trafficking task force, $1 million. Except, you know something? It was only set aside in 2014 and never again. Mm-hmm. And, in my opinion, crimes involving firearms are a terrible thing that we need to stop. But those crimes largely are committed in the cities by people who are not licensed permit holders or NRA members. They are criminals, and they are in possession of criminal firearms. And we should be cracking down on those people. We should be prosecuting those criminals, and we should be getting those guns off the streets. The statewide firearms trafficking task force was there for that express purpose. But you notice that's the first thing that went away after the fevered pitch of the debate went away. And that's a shame. And instead, we are left with a bunch of other requirements that only affect law-abiding citizens and criminals just laugh at. One of those things, Todd, just for an example, I always bring this up, the 10-round magazine limit. Just think about this for a second. Many handguns hold 17 rounds. So if I'm going to carry a firearm, I'm certainly, because I'm a law-abiding citizen, I'm not a criminal, and I'm not going to use my firearm for any type of act of violence or crime, I'm going to put 10 rounds in there because that's what the law tells me I have to. But imagine a criminal who is sitting out in front of a liquor store about to rob the place. Do you think when he's sitting there loading his gun before he goes to commit his act of crime that he's going to stop loading his gun at 10 rounds? Of course he's not. The only guy who's going to have 10 rounds is the guy that is trying to protect his family at 3 a.m.
Well, the most devoted person to behaving correctly as a citizen.
Right.
Yeah, it's. Do you feel that? I mean, my reaction as you're speaking is that there's grotesque insincerity that goes on in politics today, and that this issue is particularly delightful for the left because they view it as never winnable for their side. Like their side will never get what they want in their mind, and that's better for them than if they were to win. Right.
And they don't really have a goal of getting it in general. Most of the things that they are after are brought up as issues for the express purpose of trying to get people like me on the record. They want me to oppose some element of gun control so that they can run ads against me to raise money to say I'm a puppet of the NRA and, I'm fighting against that evil Rob Sampson. When it's a ridiculous argument. A crazed lunatic is who committed the act of crime in Florida. It wasn't a licensed gun owner, and it certainly wasn't the NRA. I mean, it was a crazed person. Why do not we direct our anger towards that person instead of people like me who are trying to come up with constructive ways of protecting people and students in school, like eliminating the notion of gun-free zones by setting up policies, legitimate policies, not I want to arm every teacher as the left would claim, but setting up a system where certainly 100 administrators in a typical high school between teachers and faculty and the janitor and the cook, some of those people may have military or police backgrounds.
Sure.
Some of those people may be permit carriers. Why are we preventing them from being able to carry and protect themselves and potentially children at that school? I'm not suggesting that we go out of our way to arm teachers. I'm just saying we need to look at ways to make sure that our schools are not sitting duck targets.
And by the way, talking about the insincerity, the response to the suggestion by the president about having weapons in the school to defend the school was all off the deep end over the most grotesque misinterpretations of what he was proposing on purpose. All right, hold on, Rob. We've got to pause once again for a quick traffic and weather update, then we'll be right back. Representative Rob Sampson is with us. 860-522-9842. We're talking with State Representative Rob Sampson. And, Rob, we have a caller, Mark in Windsor, who has a question for you, so we'll let him ask it directly. Go ahead, Mark.
Rob, hello.
How's it going, Mark?
All right. My question for you is, how do you see the Democrats lowering the youthful offender age in that, for crimes affecting these gun bills?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mark.
Well, okay, did you get any of it, Rob? Any of it make sense to you?
Yeah, getting a lot of feedback. Lowering the youthful offender age. I think they want to raise the age to allow people to not be treated as adults until they're older. Is that correct, Mark?
Correct. That's my concern.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to the conversation we started with, which is under our laws, 18 makes you an adult in America. I think that there's a worthwhile debate to be had whether we should consider 18 the adult age. But as long as we're going to have that the age that you can serve in the military and countless other things, then I think that that is the age that we need to stick to because that is the rule of law. The law could be changed, but that is the law today.
All right, let us get another caller in here. Terrence is next on WTIC with Representative Rob Sampson. Hello there, Terrence.
Hey, how are you? Well, how are you?
you?
Listen, there's a thing that's not being covered here, and they're coming up with reasons left and right. Make the age 21 or 25. Give mental counseling to everybody. A gun law, stop the gun law, raise the gun law. The biggest problem here, the thing to stop all this, is metal detectors in every major event.
So securing the schools, you mean, Terrence? I'm sorry, we're getting some feedback on you, so I'm going to let you go. What do you think of the ideas, Rob, regarding securing schools and how far that should go?
I'm not an expert on how to actually secure a building. There are certainly people in that industry, and I know that various private sector firms and corporations invest a lot of money in making sure that they have the proper security in their buildings. I know that state and local governments do that also, but certainly not to the degree that I think is necessary. Metal detectors, I think it sounds like a cliche fix-all. We installed metal detectors at the state capitol in the legislative office building after Sandy Hook, and I can describe to you 100 different ways they are more dangerous than not having the metal detectors. For one thing, we get trapped inside these contraptions regularly, and you'd be a sitting duck. Or sometimes the doors fail and there's a line of people outside who are unable to flee to the inside of the building to escape something happening outside.
So it's sort of after September 11th, there was this term that developed, which I'm not recalling what it was, show security or theatrical security, something along those lines, where there's all this expense created to make people feel safe. And that may be an appropriate response, since a lot of the fear is developed off the misinformation that you've been talking about. And we also heard from our guest earlier, who you mentioned when Ashley was on, the high school student from Farmington, that she was saying how everybody's scared in school. And that is, if you look at how many shootings there are and how many people are killed, it feels awful to have to talk about this and to be so clinical about something that carries so much human suffering with it. But on a statistical level, it's very rare, and very few people die each year in school shootings. There are so many other areas of life that are way more dangerous. And so that creates a distortion. And I'm not sure how much, based on a distorted sense of danger, how much money should be spent and how much theatrical security should be created.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Todd. You're absolutely right. Statistically speaking, those incidents are very, very rare, as are crimes involving rifles of any type. Yet that's the guns that are targeted always because they seem to be used in just these type of rare but significant instances.
Yeah, so it occurs to me that because the guys at Columbine used them, that's what everybody's used since. Like, that made it a fad. And it's totally random. It's actually simply following the lead of the shooters to go after the particular guns they use, without regard for the fact that there are other weapons, small weapons, for example, that you could go in with a couple of pistols and, as you pointed out, fire off more rounds and create more death and danger. And
Virginia Tech was committed with two handguns. One being a 22 caliber handgun, and also a Glock 9mm. No assault rifle, no rifle of any kind. And when we passed the law in Sandy Hook, I brought it up that we were not even banning those firearms. It seems ludicrous to me that we're trying to get at a problem, but really it's all about emotion and getting people on the record instead of actually trying to solve the problem.
And creating something to rally around without regard for the fact that it doesn't work. Great having you here. We'll talk to you again soon.